Hello guys and welcome back to HJW Gaming and a video that I've been putting off for a little while. I've had a little bit of illness over the recent periods. There's a bit of a delay from my free-to-play Pikemen Warrior build to now this video, which is going to be the spend version, so spend Warrior Pikemen. You'll see on the screen just here I've got the kind of free-to-play build that we recommended. If you haven't seen that already, definitely go and check that out on my channel, as a lot of the information here I will be kind of building upon, so I'll kind of take a lot of that as read and kind of skim over some of the parts that I already covered in that video and kind of give them only a brief overview, whereas we went more in depth in that video. So yeah, we'll go into the spend version of this. Now, you'll note that last time on the free-to-play video, we did state that kind of Joan of Arc was reasonable for free-to-play players and easy to obtain early on, but not necessarily the kind of powerhouse pikeman that we were looking for. So she's going to be one of the first we look to drop out. And of course, we also said that that third slot with Darius or anyone else in there should be dropped out for someone like Frederick Barbarossa, who, whilst available to free-to-play players, isn't the most free-to-play friendly, as then you'd have both him and Richard I both as spin wheel heroes. So instead we're going to look to drop both of those out of this formation and basically start completely from scratch. Richard I will feature again, but he's actually going to drop off out of our commander slot. So something new coming in for our commander. We're actually going to start here for Pikemen, and as I said, this is specifically for early game, so only when certain servers hit at a certain point will other Pikemen heroes become available. So for now I'm focusing only on kind of early game and the start of your servers, so we're going to focus on Leonidas here. Now, Leonidas is amazing. He's a hero that's available from the purchasable packs here with Heroic Triumph, the same way that you would obtain Hua Milan. If you purchase these bundles, you can get medals, and they gradually scale up as you go. I believe once you hit this point, the $29.99 bundle, I believe that's the max. I think it's $29.99 in dollars as well if you're in that currency. And you get 25 medals per purchase, but there are smaller bundles that scale up to this point. But of course, you will have to purchase all of these bundles and keep going into the later versions once if you want to try and get Leonidas up to rank 5. But he is available through this right from the beginning of the game. So, start with Leonidas. So why are we looking to use Leonidas? Let's take a look into his stats and his skills. Now, he is a might-based hero, and as you can imagine from the free-to-play build, he does primarily focus around counter-attacking. That is kind of Warrior Pikeman's primary niche. So similar to those that we spoke about in the last video, Leonidas is going to follow that significantly. His signature skill, Unyielding Soul, is again very similar to that which we saw on Richard. It's pretty strong. When you get hit by a normal attack, there's a 20% chance to deal a counter-attacking instance of might, in this case 20% chance, and the might damage I've got is around 85%, but of course my skill is only level 20, so yeah, this can be improved as you level up the commander himself. And this is up to 1 counter-attack per turn, so you can't repeatedly counter-attack within the same turn. But when your troop units fall below 50%, so similar to the threshold that we had on Richard I as well, he does empower your troops and give them increased might. So your troops will therefore scale up in damage towards the back end of fights when their troop numbers drop below 50%. He does also have a further bonus which increases your troops' damage against tribes, but of course as we're kind of focusing on these videos around PvP, that's not really anything to consider. So instead we're looking at that kind of counter-attacking might damage and that empowerment, and it's very, very similar to that of Richard I. Now you'll be questioning why I'm putting him in the commander slot. Now if we look at his commander skill, this will be the reason why. So it deals might damage to the 3 enemy troops in a fan-shaped area in front of him. Now for those who don't know, the battles in this game do stage actually on an actual open field. It isn't just a kind of turn-based attack system. So it deals might damage to 3 enemy troops, and it's a pretty high damage rate as well. At level 25, which I have it here, it's 284%. Which is a huge amount of might, and obviously then you can see it jumps up on the next instance to 320% might. which is pretty huge. And then also it gives further empowerment to the signature skill, where every time you lose 1% of your units, increases the damage by 2%. So if you think about that, when you get to 50% lost troops, which is the line as to when your signature skill kicks in with its might empowerment, you'll also be getting 100% damage coming as a result of his commander skill. So why are we using Leonidas as commander over someone like King Richard? Honestly, it's pretty close depending on which one you use. They are both pretty strong. If you have one at significantly higher respect than the other, or a significantly higher rank, I should say, than the other, I'd probably go with whichever has the higher rank. But the reason I prefer Leonidas over Richard I is because of this kind of second area of empowerment coming from his commander skill, which is the increased damage being based on the number of stacks of Mark of the Lionheart. I don't like the kind of RNG aspect of this skill. I went into it in great detail in the free-to-play video, but yeah, I'm not really a huge fan of the kind of randomness of the timing that this could trigger and synergize with other skills. I much prefer Leonidas's kind of just flat damage boost every time you lose that 1% troop, along with the huge instance of might damage, which as you'll see is pretty similar to what King Richard deals as well. So 295% here, and that's at level 30. So actually Leonidas's damage amount is slightly higher as well. Now let's take a look into Leonidas's optional skills. The ones you get with him as a base commander without taking and upgrading to any legendary skills are counterattack and vigilance. Now counterattack is what it says on the tin. It's a very standard counterattacking skill. It has a slightly lower percentage chance than Leonidas's signature skill here, with a 15% chance to immediately counterattack, and it deals might damage to the attacker. So I'm in at level 1 here, and that's 33%, limited to 1 per turn. So this is kind of like a very mediocre, kind of reasonable counter-attacking skill. There's no issue here with kind of continuing to use it if you're not looking to pick up legendary skills. But as this suspender guide, I will be recommending replacing both of these epic skills. The second epic skill is Vigilance, which is again another counter-attacking skill with the same percentage chance as counter-attack, 15% chance to immediately counter-attack. Again, only once per turn, but there's also a chance to inflict the rout effect. Now, we're not going to be looking to use any kind of rout effect synergy here, not like we did with the swordsman build. So the rout effect, all it kind of does for us here is a might damage over time, which is reasonable, but again, not as strong as the legendary skill. So I will be recommending to replace both of these. The first replacement I would recommend is Fearless Retribution. Now, Fearless Retribution is basically just an upgraded version of that counter-attacking skill. When you hit by a normal attack, there is a 20% chance. So already you've got that 5% extra chance of triggering, which will be huge over the course of an entire battle. And you deal might damage to the attacker. So at this point, it's 25%. So it's around similar to what you get from counter-attack here. In fact, it's actually slightly less, but it's worth it just for that extra percentage chance. But what you also get with this skill is you also get an amount of troop recovery. So you get recovers your troop units, triggers every 6 seconds. So every 2 full turns of all commanders. So the recovery rate at level 1 is around 7-8%, but it's a decent troop recovery. But the main thing we're looking for here is that extra counter-attacking chance. And of course, that might damage can be increased above and beyond what you would get for counter-attack as you rank up this skill and of course level up the slot as well. Now, the second legendary skill I'd recommend is Whirlwind Sweep. This increases your hero's might damage by a percentage. So currently for level 1, it's at 3.94%. And this is once every 6 seconds. So again, every 2 full turns, or every time it comes back to Leonidas, basically. And you can stack this up to 5 times. So of course, once you get to 5 stacks at my current, even only at level 1, my current stacks, that's a 20% might damage boost, which will be huge when it's in effect. And if you think about the fact that this stacks over time, that synergizes very well with his signature skill and also his commander skill, which increases that damage over time as well. So if you think about by the time you get to that kind of 50% troop threshold where the signature skill kicks in, you've got that 100% damage boost from the commander skill as well, and you will also probably have 5 stacks of Whirlwind Sweep in effect as well, which means that you'll also have, well, from this currently 20% increase, but of course you can increase that further by increasing the skills level and rank as well. So you'll have, again, a further damage boost which synergizes very, very well and stacks with Leonidas' other skills. So overall, he is a very, very strong and powerful hero when you choose to use him with these. There's one other good damage skill that's reasonably useful for him, and that is King's Blade. Now, I've recommended this on other heroes before. It deals a good amount of might damage every 9 seconds, so every 3 turns of heroes, because every hero has a 1-second turn. Deals a reasonably high amount of might damage. You see at level 1 here, it's at nearly 60%. And that gives also a percentage chance, currently 46% chance, for all your heroes to have increased damage for 3 seconds. At this point, it's 6%. So again, a decent might boost. However, I don't think that the 6% might boost and that 60% instance of damage is as effective long term as Whirlwind Sweep is with that 5 stacks of might boost. So in my opinion, this will have more of an effect over the course of an entire battle. But King's Blade is still a reasonably decent skill if you want to choose to use it. But in my opinion, if you're spending the points, go for Whirlwind Sweep and go for Fearless Retribution for the best effectiveness with Leonidas. Now let's talk about ranks and what you should aim for with Leonidas. The first rank increases the damage rate of unyielding souls counterattack damage by 15%. So obviously this is a pretty decent damage buff to his signature skill. So if you're looking to take him and you're a very, very low spender, I would definitely recommend at least getting him to rank 1. I think it takes maybe 2 or 3 purchases of the first few stages of packs to get him here. Or of course you could just purchase the first one to unlock him and then use medals to get him there as well. I'd recommend doing that, as 15% damage boost is pretty strong from the signature skill. But the real jump up here actually comes in rank 3. So if you are a mid spender, definitely aim to get him to minimum rank 3. The reason for that is it increases the trigger chance of Unyielding Souls counterattack from 20 to 24%. You'll see currently I only have him rank 2. I will be aiming to get him rank 3 very, very soon. At the minute I'm not using Pikemen, so as soon as I get them to the availability that I can level them up, I will be taking him to rank 3 as soon as possible. Because that 4% chance, whilst it doesn't sound like much, obviously that's an enormous number over long term. That's an enormous number of additional triggers of his signature skill, which is going to be his primary output of damage, and also means more of that empowerment to your troops. So you definitely want to make sure to hit that rank 3. Now for those who are large spending, rank 5 again, this is probably the biggest jump of them all. There is an absolutely enormous jump up here if you can get into rank 5, and this is why spender pikemen are probably the most popular formation at the minute. If you're a spender, definitely aim for pikemen. If you had to choose out of the 4 different types, go for warrior pikemen here, because they are absolutely elite because of a lot of it down to this skill. If you can take him to rank 5 and spend all of those medals, your signature skill Unyielding Soul will trigger at 75% units. So that is the empowerment part of the signature skill. So you'll see where it says when your troops units fall below 50%, it increases your might damage by, currently for me, 3%. But instead, that will then start triggering at 75%. So rather than having to wait towards the latter stages of a battle, you will get that trigger very early on. So that's a huge, huge damage boost. But on top of that, it can also trigger the hero's damage increase effect and increase it from 5%, which is where I had 3% at that time, but increase it from 5% to 15%. So not only does it trigger earlier, you also get a massive boost in damage. So if you can afford to do so, definitely take Leonidas to rank 5, as he's an incredible hero when you choose to do so. And of course, without even synergy with other commanders here, you can see how his own skills synergize so well along with his ranks, and you can see how effective he could be even on his own without a lot of synergy. But of course, we're not going to be leaving him all on his own, despite how great he is. We are going to be looking to pair him up with some very synergistic commanders. And it'll be no surprise to everyone else, the next choice is someone we've mentioned quite a few times here. We're going to be picking up Richard I. Now, Richard I is great, available on one of the spin wheels. And this is so great because it means that you can just continually keep getting his medals through using Empire coins, or of course you can spend to get additional draws on this. If you do your first 20 draws, you do get a kind of guaranteed number of medals. You see here is for Suleiman because I'm a little bit further on in my server, but when Richard comes up, you'll have same on here, that if you do 20 draws, you get 10 medals, and you can take this all the way up to 400 draws, and as you go through, you'll get an increasing number of medals through this, along with the medals that you pick up on the wheel, which I imagine over time you'll also pick up some of these 10s along with the 1s as well. So you can just pick up and keep spending and take him up to rank 5 immediately as soon as that spin wheel becomes available, if you're high enough spend to do so and you choose to do so. Now I'm going to kind of do the whistle stop tour a little bit on here till I get to optional skills, because I have covered him quite a lot in my free to play warrior pikeman build. But he is a might based, very high might based hero with very, very strong signature skill. His commander skill, obviously we're not going to talk about too much because I've recommended that Leonidas be the leader, but you can choose to swap those around and of course use Richard as the primary commander. As I said, I basically go on the one, whichever one you have the highest rank on. If you've got, say, Leonidas at rank 1 and Richard rank 3, then probably go for Richard. But I just find this Mark of the Lionheart based damage increase a little bit RNG versus the kind of consistency of Leonidas. But not to say that he's a bad choice. So if you have him that higher rank, maybe swap the two of them over. But signature skill is the main thing we look at here, because I recommend him in position 2. So we like his signature skill is, again, a little bit of RNG here, in that this is the skill that actually grants those kind of marks of the Lionheart. Every time your troop is hit by an opponent's normal attack, you're granted 1 stack of Mark of the Lionheart, and you can get up to 2 stacks per commander turn. So if your opponent hits you with a normal attack, say, and a skill-based attack, you will gain 2 stacks within that turn. And after reaching 20 stacks at this point, you will deal an instance of might damage, a pretty decent stack. At this point, it's 188%, but of course I only have this skill at level 10, and all stacks of your Mark of the Lionheart are removed. So of course it could take minimum 10 turns for you to deal this, but then you build up and you deal this big wave of counter-attacking damage. In addition to this, every time you lose a percentage of troops up to a max of 50%, you do gain an amount of might for Richard. So of course his might increasing means that he will deal more damage through his might based skills. So yeah, it's reasonably decent skill. Again, it's a little bit RNG as to when it will trigger off, and it depends very much on how often your opponents are hitting you. But actually it makes it quite a fantastic skill. In regards to facing against swordsmen, you'll be surprised, because swordsmen do a lot of damage through skills and secondary damage skills, and despite the fact they're being countered by swordsmen, all of these impacts will actually stack up Marks of the Lionheart for Richard, and means that he will deal damage more consistently, and actually makes him, despite not having the troop counter buff that the swordsmen do, skill wise he actually does counter them pretty well. So you'll actually get decent trades against swordsmen using him, whilst also obviously getting the counter trade with cavalry, and also getting very good trades with the neutral based archers as well. So yeah, I think he's great. This skill is pretty brilliant, and we'll see how this is affected by ranks a little bit later on, because of course I said that's up to 20 stacks. Now that is decreased by his ranks, which we'll talk about a little bit later on. But optional skills. Now, in my free-to-play video, I did cover optional skills for him, and we are going to recommend 2 this time rather than the single one that I did last time. But first up, his epic skills are very similar to those, or exactly the same rather, as to those on Leonidas. We're going to recommend changing both of those again. The first of those is going to be Fearless Retribution, mainly because it's, again, we've already covered this with Leonidas, great counter-attacking skill, deals a great amount of might, and you also get an amount of troop recovery, which is brilliant. And we're also going to recommend Forceful Retaliation. Again, a second counter-attacking skill, deals an amount of might damage, but this time you get a little bit of might empowerment. In my case, I think this is level 1. It's a 9 might stat increase for 6 seconds, so for 2 full turns. So basically we're just taking both the best counter-attacking damage skills to really kind of knuckle down on that counter-attacking focus that we're going for with this formation. Now I spoke about how ranks can affect his damage output. In particular, rank 1 is great, increases the damage rate of his counter-attack by 50%. So this also will buff those, of course, within his optional skills. That's why we recommended 2 counter-attacking based optional skills, as they will both benefit as well from that increased damage rate, which is brilliant. So you'll get that increased damage rate on those, and also, of course, his signature skill as well. Now, rank 3 is probably the most important one for these, which is that it reduces the trigger effect for Lionheart, his signature skill, down to 16 stacks. So this means if you're stacking up to 2 per second, so 2 per commander turn, It could take less than 8 now, or could take 8 at the minimum to get him to that maximum number. So you will more consistently be dealing that signature skill damage. It's essentially a 20% quickening of how often he will inflict this signature skill damage. And on top of this, each stack also increases the damage of Surmount by 12.5%. Now this doesn't really matter too much, as we're not using, and at least I'm not recommending at this point, to use him as the leader. So you can almost nullify that Surmount increase. But the main thing we're looking at here is you're going to get more triggers of his signature skill. So he is going to deal an increased amount of damage. Now the next bit is I'm going to run through if you choose to use Richard as the commander and Leonidas as second in command. So if you choose to swap them over. If that happens, you'll see here that at rank 3, the increased amount of Surmount goes up by 12.5% up to 100%. So it gives an additional boost to his commander skill if you get him to this rank 3, which is great to see. Because in his standard skill here, you'll see there's kind of no increase there. But what this relates to is in his commander skill, it specifically triggers based off marks of the Lionheart. So each stack increases skill damage by 10% up to 100%. So obviously up until he gets to 10 stacks, he's gaining 10% every single time. And then between 10 stacks and 19 stacks, as it is with him being less than rank 3, between 10 and 19 stacks, he'll be dealing 100% kind of increased damage on this commander skill Surmount. Now with the rank 3 reducing this down to 16, of course you think that would make his commander skill a little bit less consistent, because it would only be between 10 and 15 that he's dealing that 100% damage. But instead this decreases, it actually increases, the damage boost per stack of Mark of the Lionheart. And what that means is it essentially takes 8 stacks rather than 10. So still halfway through to the max will get him to 100% bonus damage, is what I'm trying to say. So instead between 8 and 15, he'll be dealing 100% damage. So actually that makes Surmount that extra bit more consistent as well, as each Mark of the Lionheart is 12.5%. So Surmount gets more consistent with its damage output, and also you get more activations of his signature skill. So rank 3 in particular, if you're using Richard I as your commander, is particularly important, and as is rank 5. Now if you're looking to use Richard I as your second in command, rank 5 is almost not relevant. You need not focus on it. But if you're using Richard as the commander in the formation, you want to take him to rank 5 as a spender, because it's a huge increase. It increases the damage rate of Surmight's might damage by 220%. So already a huge stack of additional might damage. But it also increases the slowdown effect from 20% to 30%. And what that means is this little last part of the commander skill, where it reduces the enemy troops' movement speed, obviously gets increased as a result up to 30%. Now this is amazing, as of course it means that if you're the stronger army and your opponent tries to run away, they've got no movement speed, so you can just continue to pummel them and they'll never be able to escape, and you'll get that great victory. So if you are using Richard I as your commander, definitely take him up to rank 5, as it's a huge boost. On top of that, you also get a +4 boost to Richard I's might. So yeah, as a spender, if you're using him as the commander, then you definitely want to spend. Now where do we go with the third and final commander for this early game formation? Now there's a little bit of a hint along the bottom around who we could use. I'm going to ignore Boudica for now, as she's kind of only available mid to late game. So instead we're left with kind of the choice here of Joan of Arc, who of course we detailed in the free to play video, who's very decent. Like, she has good counter-attacking skills, very usable, and of course available right from the beginning of the game, and also amazing because you can rank her up by just getting her medals through the tavern. But what we're actually going to focus on instead is we're going to focus on Frederick Barbarossa. Now, if your Barbarossa is, say, rank 1 and you've got Joan of Arc to rank 5, then maybe flip this around and use Joan of Arc instead. But for anyone else, if they're kind of similar ranks, definitely look to use Frederick Barbarossa, as I think he's the better of the kind of two, basically, when they're similar ranks. So why are we picking Frederick Barbarossa? Now, the main reason is for his signature skill. Now his signature skill reduces the amount of damage that your troops take, which is brilliant. So he gives them a good kind of buff to their defensive armor, which is amazing. And also when your units fall below 50%, it reduces their damage taken further. And then last of all, you also get a unit recovery, a pretty strong unit recovery as well. You'll see here, even at level 1, it's at near 15%. So it's a pretty strong unit recovery. So that's why we're trying to look for Frederick Barbarossa. And also that kind of kick in of the additional damage reduction and the unit recovery at 50% kicks in at the same time, of course, as we get with Richard I and also with Leonidas as well. So it synergizes very well with them in that you do take a lot of damage early game, and then when you hit that kind of 50% mark, suddenly the tide will swing completely back your way. So yeah, this again synergizes very, very well as a result with those other two commanders. Now for optional skills, the two epic optional skills Frederick Barbarossa starts off with is Metal and War Drums. Metal means that after 12 normal attacks taken by your troops, up to 2 normal attacks per second, you recover your units a decent recovery rate as well. As you can see, level 1, 38%. Pretty decent recovery. And War Drums, every 9 seconds, increases all your heroes' armor by, at level 1, 22, and also increases their strategy as well. Now, strategy is not particularly important for these pikemen, so we can pretty much almost disregard this, unless, of course, you come up against a strategy-based damage hero, but in my opinion, this is fairly niche. So War Drums you definitely want to replace. Now, you could actually choose to keep Metal here, as this recovery is a decently strong recovery and also will synergize well with the other optional skill that I recommend on Barbarossa. Now, the reason I'm recommending that you could choose to keep one epic skill and not buy 2 legendary skills is that in that mid game, as I mentioned, Boudica does become available. When that happens, she will be replacing Frederick Barbarossa. So maybe you might choose to spend a little bit less on him in order to save and then spend on her when she becomes available. So if you are looking to replace War Drums, I'd recommend replacing this with Peaceful Haven. Now, this is almost essential on Frederick Barbarossa and is one of the main synergies into why he's so strong with pikemen. So after your hero recovers units, it reduces your troops' damage taken by a percentage for 3 seconds or 1 full turn. So, of course, it's only at level 1, so that percentage will increase as you level up the skill and increase its rank. But this synergizes brilliantly well with the number of recovery skills we have available on Frederick Barbarossa. We, of course, have the recovery potentially from Metal, if you choose to keep that as the epic skill, and also his signature skill as well, offering that recovery once your troops fall below 50%. So again, once you fall below 50%, you'll start getting this recovery, and then with your epic skills, you'll get the Metal recovery. Of course, that will go every 12 attacks, so that'll be starting from the beginning, but it will also stack on top of that below 50% heal. And you'll also, every time you get that recovery, you'll be reducing the amount of damage that your troops can take. Now that's amazing, because it basically turns him into a rolling tank once you get beyond that 50% damage, because he's doing so much recovery and reducing his damage so much that he's very, very difficult to kill. And so, of course, synergizes very, very well with the kind of counter-attacking style that we're going for. Now, if you did choose to replace Metal, I would recommend doing so with Tenacity. The reason I like Tenacity is it's, again, another strong unit recovery skill. So every 9 seconds you get troop recovery. As you can see if I move my head, 66% almost at level 1. Very strong unit recovery, and it will synergize once again very, very well with Peaceful Haven. So yeah, if you're going to replace Metal, do so with another strong unit recovery just to keep that synergy going. Now, what do ranks do for Frederick Barbarossa? Again, I said I probably wouldn't recommend spending very, very heavily into him because when Boudica becomes available, you can replace with him, but you can at least see here at which point you want to get him to. Now, at rank 1, every time Pledge of Victory recovers units, it increases your recovery rate by 20%. Pledge of Victory, of course, being his signature skill. So this is reasonably decent, but not really essential. It's not a huge boost for him. As you can see, I haven't really pushed him to that point. It's a decent boost, gives you a little bit more unit recovery, but doesn't really do a lot for him, as the more important thing is getting that unit recovery synergizing with the healing and the damage reduction when you get below 50%. And it's unfortunately not an additional unit recovery, it's just an increase to the recovery rate that's already there. It's kind of similar to the increase in recovery rate that you'll get if you replace Metal with Tenacity, for example. Rank 3, however, is definitely a pretty big boost, so if you're looking to put him anywhere, I'd probably recommend getting him to Rank 3. Pledge of Victory's damage reduction effect is increased by an extra 1%, so the ability to take 1% additional, 1% less damage is definitely a great thing I would recommend. And also, when your troops' units fall below 50%, increases the damage reduction effect actually by 3%. So you get that massive boost. So 1% all the way through, and then 3% for the second half. So it ends up being kind of nets off to about a 2.5% reduction over an entire battle to your damage. Amazing. Like, as a massive damage reduction, and definitely helps to certify him as that kind of tank commander within this build. Now, for those who are happy to spend and want to get him up to rank 5 and be as effective as soon as possible, rank 5 again is a massive, massive boost for him. As I said, the only reason I don't recommend him is because you will be replacing him with Boudica in the future. But for now, if you're looking to get him to rank 5, and obviously if you want to be as strong as possible, basically, then get him to rank 5. And this triggers Pledge of Victory's effect when your troops' units fall below 75% rather than 50%. So very similar to what we saw with Leonidas. You getting that effect activating sooner means that he will be significantly more effective overall, and is definitely a massive, massive buff for him. And in addition to that, you get 2 might and 2 armor for hitting this point, and a 30% boost to your unit recovery. So if you want to be as effective as possible, of course take him to rank 5, as it's an extraordinary jump for him. But if you're looking to use this kind of, if you're not a massive, massive spender, because of course the jump from rank 3 to rank 5 is huge, obviously much bigger than from rank 0 to rank 3, for example. So you have to be willing to bite down and commit to this formation if you're going to take him to rank 5. But if you do so, you will end up with, obviously, an absolutely superb commander with enormous unit recovery, enormous damage reduction, and yeah, he synergizes fantastically well with the 2 other commanders that we recommend in this formation. Anyway, obviously I've mentioned Boudica a couple of times in here. I will be going on to record a kind of mid-game version of the Pikemen for both free-to-play and spenders as well. Both will be looking to include her. So if you want to see that coming forward in the future, definitely smash the like button to let me know that you've liked this, and also hit subscribe to see that when it pops up. Anyway, with that, I've been HJW Gaming, and I really hope to see you on the next one.